Before we begin our journey into one of humanity's most enduring and mysterious tales, I'd love to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I ask because this story spans across time zones of history itself, from ancient Mesopotamia to modern archaeological discoveries. And there's something beautiful about knowing that no matter where you are in the world right now, we're all connected to this ancient narrative that has shaped human understanding for thousands of years. In the winter of 1899, German archaeologist Robert Koldewey stood before a massive mound of crumbling brick and clay in what is now modern-day Iraq, his weathered hands brushing away centuries of desert sand from what appeared to be the remnants of an enormous ziggurat, unaware that he was uncovering physical evidence of one of the most profound stories ever told about human ambition, divine intervention, and the origins of linguistic diversity that would fundamentally alter our understanding of ancient Mesopotamian civilization and provide tangible connections to the biblical narrative that has captivated minds for millennia. The Tower of Babel, known in ancient Akkadian as Etemeniki, meaning house of the foundation of heaven and earth, rises from the pages of Genesis as both a cautionary tale about human hubris and a fascinating window into the sophisticated urban planning and monumental architecture of ancient Babylon. But to truly understand this story, we must first journey back to the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where approximately 6,000 years ago, the world's first cities began to emerge from the alluvial plains of Mesopotamia, built by the Sumerians who developed the earliest known system of writing, complex irrigation networks, and the foundational elements of what we now recognize as civilization itself. The archaeological record reveals that around 3500 BCE, settlements like Ur and Eridu were already constructing impressive step pyramids called ziggurats that served as both religious centers and administrative hubs. These massive structures, rising from the flat landscape like artificial mountains, their brick and bitumen construction techniques perfected over generations of builders who understood the challenges of working with the clay-rich soil that would become both blessing and curse in their monumental endeavors. The biblical account in Genesis chapter 11 describes how humanity, speaking a single language and possessing unified purpose, migrated eastward to settle in the land of Shinar, traditionally identified with the region of Babylonia, where they decided to build a city and a tower whose top would reach unto heaven, using brick instead of stone and bitumen for mortar. Technologies that archaeological evidence confirms were indeed characteristic of Mesopotamian construction techniques, particularly in the southern regions where stone was scarce but clay was abundant, leading to the development of sophisticated kiln-fired brick production that enabled the construction of structures far more durable than simple mud brick buildings. The narrative tells us that these early builders sought to make a name for themselves and avoid being scattered across the face of the earth, a motivation that reflects deep psychological and sociological understanding of human nature as the desire for collective identity, permanent settlement, and monumental legacy has driven civilizations throughout history to undertake massive construction projects that serve both practical and symbolic purposes. From the pyramids of Egypt to the Great Wall of China, all representing humanity's eternal struggle against the forces of time, nature, and mortality that threaten to erase human achievement from the historical record. Archaeological investigations at Babylon, particularly at the site known as Etemeniki, have revealed the remains of what was likely the largest ziggurat ever constructed, with a base measuring approximately 91 meters on each side and originally, rising to a height estimated between 91 and 100 meters, making it one of the tallest structures in the ancient world. Built and rebuilt multiple times over more than a millennium, with evidence of construction and renovation work spanning from the 3rd dynasty of Ur, around 2100 BCE through the Neo-Babylonian period under Nebuchadnezzar II in the 6th century BCE, when the structure reached its most magnificent form and likely inspired the biblical narrative that was compiled during or shortly after the Babylonian exile of the Jewish people. The cuneiform tablets discovered throughout Mesopotamia provide extensive documentation of ziggurat construction projects, including detailed records of materials used, workers employed, and religious ceremonies associated with these monumental buildings, revealing that these structures required enormous resources and sophisticated organizational systems to complete, with thousands of workers laboring for years or even decades to transport millions of bricks, tons of bitumen, and vast quantities of other materials needed to construct what were essentially artificial mountains, designed to bring humans closer to the divine realm while simultaneously demonstrating the power and prosperity of the cities that built them. The Enuma Elish, Babylon's creation epic, describes how the god Marduk established Babylon as the center of the universe and ordered the construction of Esagila, his temple, along with the great ziggurat that would serve as the earthly dwelling place of the chief deity, suggesting that these massive construction projects were understood not merely as human achievements, but as divinely ordained endeavors that reflected cosmic order and the proper relationship between heaven and earth, gods and mortals, making any challenge to divine authority through excessive human ambition a potentially catastrophic disruption of universal harmony. The biblical account describes how God came down to see the city and tower that the sons of men were building, and expressed concern that nothing would be restrained from them if they continued to work together with one language and unified purpose, leading to the divine decision to confuse their language and scatter them across the earth. An intervention that scholars have interpreted as addressing fundamental questions about the nature of human cooperation, the limits of technological achievement, and the role of linguistic diversity in shaping cultural development and geographic distribution of human populations. The story's emphasis on language confusion as the mechanism for scattering humanity reflects sophisticated understanding of how communication barriers can disrupt large-scale social organization, and archaeological evidence suggests that the collapse of various Mesopotamian empires was often accompanied by population migrations, cultural fragmentation, and the emergence of new linguistic and ethnic identities, supporting the narrative's basic premise that language and cultural unity are essential for maintaining large-scale political and social structures. The name Babel itself, explained in the text as deriving from the Hebrew word Babel meaning to confuse, actually corresponds to the Akkadian Babili meaning gate of God, highlighting the ironic transformation of what was intended as humanity's ultimate achievement in reaching toward the divine into a symbol of divine judgment against human presumption. A linguistic play that demonstrates the sophisticated literary craftsmanship underlying the biblical narrative while also connecting it to the actual historical and geographical context of ancient Babylon. Historical records from various periods describe Babylon as one of the world's great cities, with massive walls, elaborate gates, stunning architecture, and cultural achievements that drew visitors and tribute from across the known world, making it a natural setting for a story about human ambition and divine response, particularly given the city's role as a center of learning, trade, and political power that at various times controlled much of Mesopotamia and challenged the independence of smaller nations, including the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. The ziggurats themselves functioned as more than religious structures, serving as administrative centers, astronomical observatories, libraries, and symbols of civic pride that dominated ancient city. Skylines and could be seen from great distances across the flat Mesopotamian landscape, their step design reflecting sophisticated understanding of structural engineering principles needed to build stable structures of unprecedented height using available materials and construction techniques, while their orientation and proportions often incorporated complex mathematical and astronomical calculations that linked earthly architecture to celestial movements and divine geometry. Archaeological analysis of ziggurat remains has revealed evidence of sophisticated planning and construction techniques, including the use of standardized brick sizes, complex drainage systems to prevent structural damage from moisture, and elaborate foundation systems designed to distribute enormous weight across unstable alluvial soil, demonstrating that these projects required not only massive resources and labor forces, but also advanced engineering knowledge and mathematical understanding that challenges simplistic assumptions about ancient technological capabilities. The biblical narrative's emphasis on brick and bitumen construction specifically reflects accurate knowledge of Mesopotamian building techniques, as these materials were indeed characteristic of the region where stone was scarce but clay was abundant, leading to the development of sophisticated kiln-fired brick production and the use of naturally occurring bitumen deposits as waterproof mortar, technologies that enabled the construction of massive structures that could withstand the challenges of flood, weather, and time far better than simple mud brick construction, though the ultimate fragility of even these advanced techniques is demonstrated by the ruined state of most ancient Mesopotamian architecture today. The social and political context of ziggurat construction involved complex relationships between rulers, priests, merchants, craftsmen, and laborers, with these massive projects serving multiple functions including religious worship, political, propaganda, economic stimulus, and social cohesion, as the shared effort required to complete such monumental undertakings helped create unified civic identity while also demonstrating royal power and divine favor, making them essential elements in the development and maintenance of urban civilization in ancient Mesopotamia. The Tower of Babel story addresses fundamental questions about the relationship between human technological achievement and divine authority, exploring themes that remain relevant today as humanity continues to push the boundaries of scientific knowledge, engineering capability, and global communication, with modern parallels ranging from space exploration and artificial intelligence to international cooperation, and the challenges of maintaining cultural diversity in an increasingly connected world. The archaeological evidence from Babylon and other Mesopotamian sites reveals that ziggurat construction continued for over 2 millennia, with each generation adding to, renovating, or rebuilding these massive structures according to changing religious practices, political circumstances, and technological developments, suggesting that these monuments represented ongoing cultural commitments rather than single-generation achievements, making their eventual abandonment and decay even more poignant as symbols of the impermanence of human civilization. Despite our greatest efforts to create lasting legacies, the linguistic implications of the Babel narrative have fascinated scholars for centuries, as the story provides an ancient explanation for the diversity of human languages and the geographic distribution of different cultural groups, offering an alternative to modern scientific theories about language evolution and human migration patterns, while also addressing deep philosophical questions about communication, understanding, and the role of language in shaping thought and social organization. Mesopotamian literature includes numerous references to the construction and significance of ziggurats, with texts describing elaborate dedication ceremonies, regular maintenance requirements, and the religious rituals performed at these sites, including annual festivals that celebrated the connection between earthly and divine realms, processional ceremonies that involved the entire urban population, and sacrificial offerings designed to maintain divine favor and ensure the continued prosperity of the city and its inhabitants. The economic impact of ziggurat construction on ancient Mesopotamian society was enormous, requiring the organization of vast supply chains to obtain materials, food, and tools needed for these projects, the development of specialized crafts and technologies, and the creation of administrative systems capable of managing complex long-term construction programs that often span multiple generations, making these monuments not just religious and political symbols but also major drivers of economic development and technological innovation. The story's emphasis on human unity and divine intervention reflects sophisticated theological thinking about the proper relationship between creature and creator, exploring themes of pride, ambition, cooperation, and divine judgment that appear throughout religious literature and continue to resonate in contemporary discussions about human responsibility, technological ethics, and the limits of scientific and social progress, and addressing fundamental existential questions about meaning, purpose, and human destiny. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout Mesopotamia indicates that ziggurat construction was associated with periods of political stability and economic prosperity, as these massive projects required sustained peace, abundant resources, and effective governance to complete successfully, while their abandonment or destruction often coincided with periods of warfare, economic collapse, or political fragmentation, supporting the biblical narrative suggestion that such monumental achievements require unified social effort and divine blessing to succeed. The technical challenges involved in ziggurat construction included not only the obvious problems of moving enormous quantities of materials and organizing large workforces, but also sophisticated engineering issues such as preventing structural collapse under enormous weight, managing water drainage to prevent foundation damage, and creating access ramps and stairways that could safely accommodate the movement of people and materials to great heights, all accomplished without modern machinery, mathematical tools, or construction materials, demonstrating remarkable innovation and problem-solving capability among ancient builders. The religious significance of ziggurats in Mesopotamian society extended far beyond their function as temple platforms, as these structures were understood to represent cosmic mountains that connected the earthly and divine realms, with their step design symbolizing the gradual ascent from human to divine consciousness, their precise orientation reflecting astronomical knowledge and cosmic order, and their elaborate decoration incorporating mythological narratives and divine symbols that reinforce religious teachings and cultural values for both literate elites and illiterate masses who could read these architectural messages. The political dimensions of the Babel narrative include its critique of imperial ambition and centralized power, as the story can be read as a warning against the dangers of political unity that serves human pride rather than divine will, a theme that would have particular resonance for ancient audiences living under various Mesopotamian empires that conquered, displaced, and oppressed smaller nations in their quest for territorial expansion and monumental achievement, making the story's emphasis on divine judgment against human presumption both theologically meaningful and politically relevant. The preservation and transmission of the Tower of Babel story through Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions demonstrates its enduring power to address fundamental human concerns about ambition, communication, community, and divine authority, with each religious tradition interpreting the narrative according to its own theological emphasis, while preserving the basic story structure that connects human technological achievement to divine response and the creation of linguistic and cultural diversity. The archaeological work at Babylon has been complicated by modern political instability, warfare, and damage to ancient sites, but decades of excavation have revealed enough evidence to confirm that the biblical description of Mesopotamian construction techniques, urban planning, and monumental architecture reflects accurate knowledge of ancient practices, even if the specific supernatural elements of the narrative cannot be verified through material evidence, lending credibility to the story's historical and cultural context while leaving questions of divine intervention to matters of faith and theological interpretation. The influence of the Tower of Babel story on later literature, art, and cultural development has been profound, inspiring countless works of fiction, painting, sculpture, and architecture that explore themes of human ambition, divine judgment, communication barriers, and the relationship between technological progress and spiritual wisdom. From Peter Bruegel's famous paintings to modern science fiction novels about global communication, networks, and artificial intelligence, demonstrating The narrative's continued relevance for contemporary concerns about human achievement and its consequences. The urban planning evident in ancient Babylon, with its massive walls, elaborate gate systems, broad processional ways, and carefully organized districts for different social and economic functions, reveal sophisticated understanding of city design principles that supported large populations, facilitated trade and commerce, enabled effective governance, and created impressive public spaces that reinforced social hierarchy and civic identity, making it a natural setting for a story about human cooperation in monumental construction projects that challenge divine authority. The relationship between the Tower of Babel narrative and other ancient flood and creation stories suggests that this tale was part of a broader tradition of explaining human origins, divine intervention, and the development of civilization, with parallels to stories from various cultures about divine punishment for human presumption, the creation of linguistic diversity, and the scattering of peoples across the earth, indicating that these themes addressed universal human concerns, rather than purely local historical events. The mathematical and astronomical knowledge required for ziggurat construction included understanding of geometric principles needed to create stable step structures, calculation of materials and labor requirements for massive construction projects, and incorporation of celestial observations into architectural orientation and proportions, demonstrating that ancient Mesopotamian civilization possessed sophisticated technical knowledge that supported both practical construction needs and complex religious symbolism, linking earthly architecture to cosmic order. The social organization necessary for ziggurat construction involved complex hierarchies of planners, overseers, skilled craftsmen, and laborers, with evidence from cuneiform texts indicating that these projects employed specialists in various trades including brickmaking, bitumen preparation, metalworking, stone carving, and architectural decoration, while also requiring massive numbers of ordinary workers for moving materials, mixing mortar, and basic construction tasks, creating temporary communities of thousands of people working together toward common goals under centralized direction. The environmental challenges of building in Mesopotamia included dealing with extreme heat, seasonal flooding, salt accumulation in soil, and building materials, and the absence of local sources for stone and timber, problems that required innovative solutions such as the development of kiln-fired brick technology, sophisticated drainage systems, salt-resistant construction techniques, and long-distance trade networks to obtain necessary materials, all of which contributed to the distinctive architectural characteristics that made Mesopotamian monumental buildings immediately recognizable and technically impressive. The story's emphasis on making a name and avoiding scattering reflects deep understanding of human psychology and social dynamics, as the desire for lasting reputation and stable community has motivated construction of monumental architecture throughout history, from ancient pyramids and temples to modern skyscrapers and space stations, all representing attempts to create permanent symbols of human achievement that will survive beyond individual lifespans and preserve cultural memory for future generations. The theological implications of the Tower of Babel narrative have been extensively debated by religious scholars, who have interpreted the story variously as a condemnation of human pride, an explanation for linguistic diversity, a critique of imperial ambition, a demonstration of divine sovereignty, or a complex allegory about the proper relationship between human technological capability and spiritual wisdom, with each interpretation offering different insights into the meaning and contemporary relevance of this ancient tale. The archaeological context of the story includes not only the physical remains of ziggurats and ancient cities, but also thousands of cuneiform tablets that document the daily life, religious practices, and administrative procedures of Mesopotamian civilization, providing detailed evidence about how these ancient societies organized massive construction projects, maintain complex urban communities, and understood the relationship between human achievement and divine authority, offering rich background for interpreting the biblical narrative within its historical and cultural setting. The linguistic analysis of the Babel story reveals sophisticated literary techniques, including wordplay, irony, repetition, and symbolic imagery that enhance the narrative's theological and moral messages while also connecting it to broader patterns in ancient Near Eastern literature, demonstrating that this tale was crafted by skilled storytellers who understood how to use language effectively to convey complex ideas about human nature, divine justice, and the consequences of excessive ambition in ways that would resonate with diverse audiences across many generations. The legacy of the Tower of Babel continues to influence contemporary discussions about globalization, communication technology, cultural diversity, and human cooperation, as the story's themes remain relevant for addressing modern challenges, such as the development of global communication networks, the preservation of linguistic and cultural minorities, the ethics of genetic engineering and artificial intelligence, and the proper balance between technological progress and traditional wisdom, making this ancient narrative surprisingly applicable to current debates about human future and responsibility. The construction techniques documented at Babylon and other Mesopotamian sites demonstrate remarkable engineering sophistication, including the use of standardized measurements that facilitated large-scale construction planning, innovative foundation systems designed to support enormous weight on unstable soil, complex internal drainage networks that prevented structural damage from moisture, and decorative techniques that combine functional and symbolic elements to create buildings that served both practical and religious purposes, while also functioning as powerful symbols of cultural identity and political authority. The story concludes with divine intervention that confuses human language and scatters the builders across the earth, establishing linguistic and cultural diversity as part of divine plan, rather than accidental historical development. A conclusion that has profound implications for understanding human differences as potentially positive, rather than simply barriers to cooperation, suggesting that cultural diversity serves important divine purposes that may not be immediately apparent to human understanding, but ultimately contribute to the richness and resilience of human civilization. Across the globe, through archaeological discovery, linguistic analysis, historical research, and theological reflection, the Tower of Babel emerges not simply as an ancient myth, but as a sophisticated narrative that addresses fundamental questions about human ambition, divine authority, technological achievement, and cultural diversity that continue to challenge and inspire us today, reminding us that the greatest human achievements, no matter how impressive or enduring they may appear, remain subject to forces beyond our control and understanding, while the diversity of human languages, cultures, and perspectives that resulted from ancient Babel continues to enrich our world with the beautiful complexity that makes human civilization both challenging and magnificent.